Hello, I'm Cheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. Welcome to One-to-One. Most of us interact on an almost daily basis with retail workers of all kinds. The clerks and salespeople who wait on us seem almost interchangeable, some of them helpful, some of them less so. But they're always there, no matter what the weather or how big the holiday. So what's it like being on the other side of the counter or cash register? What kinds of shifts do retail workers work, and do they have a choice about it? How many hours of work can they count on in a week or a month, and is it enough to support a household? And do their work schedules allow them to plan for the exigencies of running a home, taking care of children, and tending to one's personal needs? Stephanie Luce, Professor of Labor Studies at the Murphy Institute for Worker Education of the City University of New York, is co-author of the new study, Short Shifted. She and her co-author surveyed more than 200 retail workers in Manhattan and Brooklyn and learned about the shocking realities of working in a sector that now comprises 10 to 15% of all the jobs in our economy. Welcome.
Thank you.
So what led to this study and who collaborated in it?
Well, we actually began the project a couple years ago. I worked with some researchers at the Retail Action Project here in New York, and we wanted to survey retail workers in New York City to see what was going on in terms of their jobs, their day-to-day jobs, because it is, when you look at the jobs growing in the country, in the economy, retail keeps coming up to the top of the list. So what are these jobs like? And at that time we found that many workers are struggling to get enough hours of work, struggling to get a stable schedule, struggling to get a living wage. So we followed that study up this past year with a more in-depth look at how do these workers survive if you have these irregular schedules. What do you actually need to do on the day-to-day to make your lives work?
So tell me about describe the group that you studied.
Sure. So what we did is we looked this time primarily at workers in large national chains, primarily in Manhattan and Brooklyn, because we wanted to see what is kind of the forefront of the jobs. We know there's all kinds of retail jobs, but the national retailers are really the ones setting the trends for what's going on in the industry. We went and talked to cashiers, sales associates, stockers, and just to get a sense from them, what is their scheduling like, what's their day-to-day, what are the best parts of the job, what are the worst parts of the job. Many of the workers were in their 20s, but we also found workers up into their 60s. Many of the workers have been in the retail industry for many years.
But the population skewed younger.
It skews younger, but not as young as some people might think. Many people might think, oh, these are primarily teenagers or college-age students, but the average retail worker is in their 30s nationally, and they've been in the business for more than 5 years.
Now, percentages of women, people of color?
Right. It's primarily, particularly in New York City, primarily women and people of color, but you know, it's the industry in general. Some of the sectors of retail are more male and more white, for example, auto dealers and gas station, but we were looking primarily at the clothing stores, shoe stores, accessories, and department stores, and there it's primarily female workforce.
To sum it up, you found that basically the retail jobs, at least the new retail jobs, are not that great.
No, unfortunately, a lot of people go into the field because they want to help people. They like the retail industry, they like fashion, but they find that
they think they're going to be able to make a career.
Right, they want to make a career. Many employers will advertise for a full-time job, but when they come to interview, they'll actually find that it's not a full-time job, that they will be put on probation for maybe 2 to 3 months, and they're only guaranteed 8 hours of work a week, so maybe 2 shifts, 4 hours of work. They try and pick up extra shifts, but they're trying to make it through their probation period on just 8 hours a week guaranteed. So that's pretty tough.
You talk about the movement towards lean, quote, lean manufacturing practices, and it's happening not just in retail, it's certainly happening at colleges and universities where you have a lot of adjunct, and in other areas where you don't have fewer and fewer full-time workers and more part-time workers or contract workers.
Yes. Yes, definitely. So we saw a lot of employers in the 90s were really moving to cut their costs through reducing inventory and things on the shop floor. Now they're looking to cut costs in their labor in the field of employment. So rather than guaranteeing hours or guaranteeing benefits, they're really trying to schedule the very minimum amount of labor that they need. So that does result in things like adjunct workers in the university setting, part-time temporary workers in the retail setting. But you can look at freelancers in the graphic design industry. You can look at pretty much any industry and you see this more flexible workforce emerging.
Do you know what percentage of all retail workers are involuntary part-time workers?
Well, that number has been growing, and it's up to about, I believe, 40% of the, well, many of the retail workers are actually part-time in general, not all of them involuntary. Many people do want part-time work, and that's what's challenging about this field. But I believe it's about a third to 40% now are involuntarily working part-time.
And most, I would imagine, have few or no benefits.
Right, so that's one of the really scary things about this is even some of the people that are working full-time hours, 40 hours a week, are not classified full-time. And there they do not have access to health benefits, pension, paid days off.
How can they be working 40 hours a week and not be classified as full-time?
In some cases, it's not, maybe it's 39 hours a week, or it's not predictable. They're guaranteed 15 or 20, and then they're picking up additional shifts because they're scheduled for on-call, or they are asking, to take over other people's shifts. So they're not formally full-time.
And is not making them formally full-time, or give them only 29 hours or 34 hours instead of 35. What's a full-time shift? What is it?
Well, according to the Department of Labor, they classify full-time work as 35 hours a week or more. So.
And so, is there a tendency to bring them just up to that, but not to it in order so that they don't have to pay benefits? Don't have to get benefits?
So a lot of it is that employers do not want to get locked into paying benefits. They also don't want to get locked into guaranteeing hours per week.
You talked about what you mentioned earlier, and this is a big problem with these workers. Many of them don't get enough hours per week to support themselves.
Right.
How does that work? How does that...
Yeah. So what the employers are doing is they're using pretty sophisticated technologies to track sales patterns, to go with the seasons of retail. So employers may have one week they might want a lot of people to work, and the next week it's a few people, or the weather's bad. So they want to be able to keep workers on call, to call them in the night before to say, we're going to need you tomorrow, we're not. Or if we're not making our sales goals, we want to be able to send you home. So this leaves workers in this very precarious place, not sure week to week what their hours are. Part of the puzzle is then how are they surviving, because it's not predictable. And because it's not predictable, it also makes it difficult to get a second job. So we're finding that many of these workers are living still with family members, extended family, who are relying extensively on parents to help with childcare, or just living with many roommates and a large household because they're trying to pull together their incomes to make a sustainable living.
You talked about the scheduling, that often workers will be required to be available for certain periods of times, but employers seem to make little or no attempt to, say if a worker says, I'm available all day on Tuesdays and Thursdays, will make no attempt to give them a full shift on Tuesday and a full shift on Thursday.
Right. And I should say we did hear from some workers that have employers who make more of an effort than others. But on average, we are finding that the managers of the stores are themselves getting pressures from the corporate headquarters. The corporate headquarters will say, this is your amount of budget you have for the week for payroll. You can't go over that. So the managers need to maintain their own flexibility, because if they've guaranteed somebody a full shift on Tuesday and Thursday and they're not making their sales goals, they want to be able to send them home. So I think a lot of the workers we talked to just felt very disposable. They said, even if I just express a preference for certain hours, they don't necessarily listen to that, and it seems they'd rather just fire me and hire somebody else to be more flexible.
And it's not necessarily that they're intentionally trying to screw the workers. It's that they're trying to, the managers are trying to meet their quotas, and the companies really don't care. They just want to do the most cover the store with the least amount of cost.
Right, exactly. And we found, employees are talking about that they have weekly and hourly sales goals. They also have to focus on what they call the conversion rate, the number of shoppers who come into the store who leave with a purchase. So as the software or the technologies are tracking those trends down to the hour, managers are feeling the pressure like, I have to keep my labor costs relative to the sales costs.
You also talk about the phenomenon of the on-call shift.
Right, right. Yeah, so this is the notion that employees need to say, I'll be available to work, I'll be on call, I'll wait, and the night before or even the morning of, I'll call in 2 hours ahead to see if you need me. Some people say they'll call in 3 hours ahead, and the manager will say you have to call back in an hour. That's really tough in New York, where you might live an hour or more away, so you only have 2 hours notice whether or not you're going to have to come in. And you can imagine scheduling childcare under that situation is extremely difficult.
It's very hard to plan your life under those conditions.
Right, right.
And you also talked about the inconvenient posting of shifts. It's hard to find, if you want to know what your shifts are going to be like, your work week is going to be like a weekend ahead or 2 weeks ahead, it's very difficult to find out.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the things that really stood out to me this round of studies, interviews, is that the employers do have access to very sophisticated technologies, but yet we did not find that they're using those to the benefit of scheduling employees. So employees are still sometimes submitting requests by paper, having to physically go into the store to see if their schedule's posted. They are not given permission to swap shifts with other workers without the manager's permission. So it seems that it should be relatively easy to adopt some of these technologies that workers might be able to use from home, to swap shifts, for example. But we weren't finding that. For the most part, we were finding workers having to really jump through hoops to get their schedules.
We're going to take a short break. Then I'll be back with more with Stephanie Luce of the Murphy Institute after this message. Welcome back to One to One. I'm Cheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York, and I'm talking with Stephanie Luce, Professor of Labor Studies at CUNY's Murphy Institute. A lot of the workers you surveyed talked about the problem of coverage, the coverage problem.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Right. So we were asking people, what do you like best about your job? What's hardest? A lot of them said what was hardest was that because employers are trying to keep labor costs low, they don't schedule enough workers on the floor at any one time. So they're being asked to cover multiple areas. So they may be asked to covering the men's department and may be then called to run up and help assist with the cash register. So they're feeling like just kind of frantic. They're not allowed to do their job well. Many of the workers really do enjoy retail. They like to help customers, but they feel like then they can't give good service. They can't really pay attention because they're being called, run in the back and help with this, or covered this other, 3 sections at once. It's frustrating for customers. It's frustrating for workers.
What did they say they like most about their jobs?
Well, it's, that's what's really nice, is talking to a lot of people who really enjoy working with people, who really want to help people, who want to make them feel comfortable in the clothes that they're buying or how they look. Some of them just like the fashion industry and want to be getting more into design or just fashion in general. But really, it's a lot of people who like working with people. Mm-hmm. And it's a shame that they're not allowed that opportunity to really invest in that skill.
Did they seem to be on any kind of career paths? Right. Well, I guess that's I guess it's sort of answer. I mean, I guess you sort of have to be a full-time worker to be on a career path, right?
Right. Well, and some of these employees are students, so they actually prefer a part-time schedule, but they feel that they are not given access to full-time work. So they would like to be able to learn new areas within the field and then move up, given opportunities for promotion. And unfortunately, that's just not happening. Instead, it's very high turnover. So people will maybe stay in the industry, but they might quit that job and move to another job within retail. And many workers we talk to express real frustration because they would want to move up, but instead the employer would hire people from the outside. They would bring in outside for a management position and not look to hire from within.
I see. Another problem was inaccurate documentation of hours.
Yes, yes. So we see this phenomenon of what's sometimes called wage theft happening in other industries as well. But what it would be is that employees would find that either they worked more hours than they thought they were being paid for, or they were being asked to stay after they clocked out. Like in some of the stores, they would clock out and then have to line up to go through security. Security had to check their bags and make sure they weren't stealing the clothes. That's 15 minutes that they're being required to stay and not being paid for. That adds up. That's a significant amount of time. So, so keeping track of how many hours they're actually being working and what they're being paid, the documentation was not always there. Some of them report not getting pay stubs. And you know that's a pretty serious problem.
It's amazing, not getting a pay stub.
Yeah.
Or when you got a pay stub, it's not listing your hours on it, so you can't.
Right. And in fact, in New York State has a law that workers must be paid for a 4-hour shift if they're sent home early. But a lot of workers didn't know about that law, and they are sent home after 2 hours of work. They're supposed to be paid for 4, and they're not always.
If a worker is sick, they may have to call around and find somebody to cover for them instead of that being the employer's responsibility.
Right. And fortunately, that's one area in which we know that legislation can help, because New York has a new law since we did our study, the paid sick days law, which now makes that illegal. Employers are responsible for covering when employees are sick. But we interviewed workers that said that they had to get up and find people, call people at 7 a.m., which is hard to do, and ask them, can you come in?
Especially if you're sick.
Right, exactly. One store, they had to go in to the store and to prove that they were sick. So this just seems crazy. Some of these stories I just feel hard to believe.
Wow. Do part-time workers get sick days?
Well, now under the New York law they do, but that was not true, and that's still not true in many states.
How many sick days, or does it vary?
It varies depending on, which the paid sick law does. In New York, it's just for the city.
And I think one other issue was, not getting their breaks, not getting a real lunch half hour. It's something that the managers are supposed to say, have you had your break? Yes. But managers are not necessarily looking out for them.
Right, that's what another area where we just kept hearing over and over that people felt no one cared about them, that they were trying to invest in the store, but the management was not necessarily investing in them. So stories of workers who are, especially on a big sale, and the managers would not necessarily give them their break or say, you have to wait, and then it's a 10-hour day and they haven't had their break. Some workers say they, even when they're on break, if they're in any kind of uniform or name tag, that customers are still coming up and asking for their help, and they really have to, if they're in the restroom, they might get customers asking for help. So it's hard to take a real break if you are still clearly in uniform, and yet they're not being paid for that time.
Which companies, are there certain companies that seem to be doing better by their workers than others, and some that are not doing so hot that we can call out here on this program?
Well, one of the things that we know is from the research, it's clear some companies are doing better practices. Some that have unionized workforces, Macy's, for example, allows workers to schedule in advance, to use a computer to block out shifts and give some preferences. I think we found people at Lord & Taylor were able to schedule weeks up in advance. So it's possible to do that. It's possible to use the technology in employees' favor. And in fact, some of these same companies in Europe are doing, very advanced scheduling and having no problem with it. Some companies like H&M are beginning to adopt those practices in the U.S. that they've been doing in Europe. We found other cases where, I think Victoria's Secret was an example where they were engaging in this practice of wage theft, of making the workers have their bags checked, and go through security and not being paid for it. So. It's not necessarily predictable what kind of retailer will do it. It might be, all the retailers on one block, one might be doing better practices and one might be doing much worse.
And all of this, these conditions, as you mentioned, would lead to high turnover because workers are going to go out the door as soon as they get a better opportunity, or maybe just in disgust if they don't even have something else.
Yes. Some workers say they're constantly looking for something else. They just they don't feel valued. They feel like the company doesn't care about them. So they are looking to move on because they don't see any opportunities for growth.
And as you mentioned, the stores where there are unions, those workers tend to do much better.
Yeah, they have a much more predictable schedule. They have guaranteed minimum hours. They have benefits and higher wages, and often we'll see a chance for some training and growth. Some people think retail is just a low-skilled, disposable job, but in fact, there are many skills involved in the industry. The skills of working with people, the skills of even working with the technologies, the sophisticated technologies that we're seeing, working with customers that now want to be able to shop online. So they come into the store and you might be able to help them figure out where they can get their best deal. There's lots of skills to be learned, and I think a unionized setting is often better at giving that kind of training for workers to be able to move up and have a career.
I think before the show you were saying that about 11% of workers are now unionized in the country?
Right. Nationally, yeah, only
Right.
11% of workers, yes.
Do we know how many in the retail
Even
business?
far less. It's only nationally about 3 to 4%.
Wow.
New York's higher than that, but nationally it is not a unionized industry. So this is one of the challenges, at least in the United States. In other countries, retail is much more unionized.
So what can be done? What can be done to improve these conditions in that area?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that some people think, oh, it's inevitable. These are just bad jobs, and that's how it is. But 50, 60 years ago, that's what we thought about manufacturing. But we passed laws and we created conditions to stabilize the work and raise wages. There's lots of legislation that could help. We could, in fact, pass laws that mandate employers pay workers when they're being asked to be on call. Unionized contracts do that. They say if an employee has to wait by the phone or has to sit in the store and wait for hours, then they need to be paid for that time. Some cities are passing local living wage laws that not only mandate a higher wage, but also require employers to offer full-time work to their existing employees before hiring additional part-time. That would allow workers that want part-time to stay part-time, but they have to be offered the opportunity to go to full-time. So there's different kinds of policies that could assist. Unionization also seems clearly a better situation. That would require stronger labor laws that penalize employers who fought unions or tried to kick unions out of the workplace.
Are there any retailers who are being unionized? Is that?
Yes, there are, certainly more so in New York than other places, but workers are electing to form unions, looking to have representation in the workplace. I think that, workers can see that they would be stronger with a union, whether it's a clothing retailer or in some cases like fast food workers and Starbucks workers who are saying we would like to have a union because we think our conditions would be more equal.
You've said that increasing staffing, if employers would increase staffing levels, it would probably result in be better both for the workers and for the customers.
Right. Yeah, there's lots of research that shows that what we call high road employment practices are profitable. They increase customer loyalty, they increase customer satisfaction. So so more service people on the floor, trained retail, like people that know about the product and can give advice about the products. These kinds of things we find in the research that they actually pay off. And you could even see it in retail, like comparing a company like Costco that pays a higher wage and gives higher hours. Their turnover rates are far, far less than a company like Walmart that pays very low wages and provides no training. Costco saves tens of millions of dollars a year because they're not having this high turnover, having
Right.
to train people.
Very interesting.
Having to hire people, sorry.
So I think we have about 15 seconds. What's
Okay.
your next study going to be on? Do you know?
Well, I think we just are still interested in what are some possible solutions to make life better for retail workers, to really make this a sustainable career. It is a growing industry. It's where the jobs are. It needs to be a rewarding career.
We're out of time. I want to thank Stephanie Luce for joining me today. If you'd like more information, go to the Murphy Institute's website at sps.cuny.edu. For the City University of New York and 1-to-1, I'm Cheryl McCarthy. If there are any people you'd like to hear from or topics you'd like us to explore, please let us know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.